Yes.
All right. So for my teams, I don't need the microphone on, right? Like,
No, sir.
no.
Yeah, it'll broadcast through. So yeah, you should be able to be heard. Mike?
Mr. Swanson, can you hear us on Teams?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So the room is packed.
Take it easy, everybody. Settle down.
So thank you for all of you that are online that have joined us this evening to talk about finances. Our agenda has been published on Board Book. I'm also sharing it on Teams. Hopefully you are able to access Teams. If not, let me see if I can publish the meeting code. So bear with me 1 second while I get that, and also make it available on my screen share. Now my screen share is also being broadcasted on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Or it can be, yeah. We'll split between them for sure.
Okay. Let me just... I'll share my screen again. And so if you are able to join and would like to comment on anything, we will allot some time near the end for public comment. So let's go ahead and get started with our agenda. The first item that we have here is the public-facing repository of working files. The idea here is to establish a repository via SharePoint where Dr. Hill, the business office, and I would be able to collaborate on the working files, be it credit card payments, bill lists, etc. Those will be made available in the SharePoint also for your consumption. So you should be able to see basically the work that the items that we're working on. I've had the opportunity to talk to Dr. Hill, and she's okay with it. And Mr. Swanson, when you get the moment, I also sent you an email. When you get a moment, please create one. Once that is created, we will share it with the community at large, and we will begin collaborating with everyone in the community as it relates to finances.
Yep, saw the email, no problem at all.
Excellent. The next thing we want to talk about is the update on Gilbane payments, which I believe is the phase 2 for the master facility plan. And with this, I'm going to ask Dr. Hill. Well, before I ask Dr. Hill to talk, I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Hill. It's kind of hard to introduce someone when there's no one in the room. But Dr. Hill is the newest addition to the business office. She is the leader of the business office. She's been in the role, what is it, like almost 20 days, something roughly?
It'll be 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Wednesday.
And in the 3 weeks, she has done a stellar job with tackling the day-to-day activities as well as spearheading initiatives that will help the business office better maintain and address ongoing issues. So, Dr. Hill, please take it away on the Gilbane payments.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This summer
Oh,
we had.
would you like to approach the microphone?
Good evening, everyone. This summer, the district, we had quite a bit of work, construction work that took place here this summer. And so right now, in our possession, we do have quite a few bills for Gilbane. The final contract value for, at least for the summer work, is to the tune of $36,218,532. Right now, we have $20-something million of bills in our queue at the moment that do require processing. During the May board meeting, the Board of Education did agree to utilize the fund balance from the Ed Fund in order to secure construction for these payments. So today, from this meeting, from the Finance Committee, it would be an action item for us to move forward ahead in reference to transferring some funds so that we can secure our contractual obligations. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the final contract value for summer work is to the tune of $36,218,532. We do have bills to the tune of close to $20 million at the moment, with more projects that will take place throughout the court, at least for the next couple of months. That is the status for the Gilbane. Are there any questions in reference to payments and things of that nature?
I'll chime in. We being the board, initially approved, was it $50 million, right, to be transferred in this fiscal year. Due to some unforeseen, I'll call them unforeseen circumstances and whatnot, we, under the leadership of Dr. Hill, decided to we're recommending not transferring the $50 million, rather move the amounts that are necessary to cover the payments. I feel that will put us in a better position to address unknown financial obligations. And because of that if I understand correctly, we will need to amend the budget.
That is correct. On August 22nd, the Board of Education approved a budget. In that budget, there was a $50 million transfer. By us not transferring that $50 million, we would need to amend. The goal is to amend the budget in January. The goal is mandatory, mandated by the state that we amend by June 30th. Of course, we don't want to wait to that long. So we will amend in January, and we will go through the same process as we did before with the budget process, making sure it's on display, for 30 days. But as opposed to the $50 million that was approved, it will now only be to the tune about $38 million. That's what we discussed with the auditors and attorneys and things of that nature, along with the Board of Education.
Yeah. Okay. So thinking of a timeline, you're thinking publishing the amended budget by like November?
Probably around November, December, somewhere around there. Where we want to. So the goal would be to finish the tax levy process first. Okay, so right after the tax levy, then we will move into the process of amending the budget and going through those steps as well.
Okay.
So we wouldn't want to amend the budget and the tax levy at the same time, because as we all know, we want to make sure we get our tax dollars. So we want to make sure our attention is focused on that. But at the top of the year, the goal would be to come in January and start going through that process again with amending the budget.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I see Dr. Corvallis has joined us. Dr. Corvallis, do you have any questions or comments regarding Gilbane payments or amending the budget?
I guess my question would be to Gilbane. I'm concerned about a comment that was made by LT, and the question I asked was work that has not started. I wanted to step back and freeze the process and not continue the work because of finances.
Yes.
The statement from LT was that we can't do it because contracts have been set out. And we have no choice but to continue I believe we're phase 3, is that correct?
Phase 2, sequence
For the
2.
summer, for next summer. Phase 2?
Mhm.
Phase 2. And we have no choice but to continue phase 2. Well, I'm asking this question because if we haven't started, we should be able to stop.
Yes.
Simply because we haven't started the process, we don't owe them money for phase 2.
Mhm.
And I know this knowledge because my family owns a construction company. We should be able to put a stop to that.
Yeah, so given ample time, right?
Correct.
Should be able
So-
to.
This is what I have an issue with. Why can't we just put the brakes on and just hold off so we find out where we're at
Mhm.
and where our finances are? Because that is a lot of money that was approved by this board to transfer from the educational fund that was, I'm sorry, what was it, $38 million?
Initially 50.
Initially 50,
50.
but we decided not to.
We decided to take 38 million, and I know the talk started out before you and I got here, Dr. Hill, in May, and they're transferring 38 million, and that alone makes me nervous. Nonetheless, I feel uncomfortable right now as it is. If we can just put the brakes on the construction and see where we're at
Mhm.
before we continue spending any more money on construction.
Got it. Have we initiated talks, outside of LT, have we had any other talks with Gilbane about these obligations in the summer?
So I did meet with Gilbane, the construction company, Mr. Weeks, along with the other representative, and with LT. And he did say that contracts were already sent out. But again, that was as far as we gotten. So of course, it would be some other ongoing conversations that would need to take place to see what that possible move would potentially look like.
Okay.
And when I mean that, with the attorneys and looking at the contract and seeing what we're actually committed to,
Okay.
and things of that nature, yes.
Okay, so we're going through it with a fine tooth comb to see.
Right, we need to, right,
Yeah.
someone really just needs to review the contract.
Yes.
But of course, phase 2, sequence 2 work was completed, and we are obligated to pay for the work that's been done, and that's why we're here today,
Yes.
to move forward with that piece. But in reference to next year, I'm not sure if that's phase 2, sequence 3. I would have to take a look. I'm not sure if it's still part of the same phase. But be as it may, that is a conversation, and it is of concern.
Yes, agreed.
Now, there was another issue, I don't know if we discussed it prior to me coming in. LT did say that Gilbane wanted his $20 million check before our next board meeting, and there is a process that we have to follow, and a resolution that needs to be done, and transfers that needs to be done, and we cannot do what he
Yeah.
is asking. So did you explain that, Dr. Hill, yet?
No, we didn't move to that yet. For the next board meeting, we do have to have a conversation with our attorney to give him the actual dollar amount that we plan on transferring.
Mhm.
From there, he will prepare or draw up the resolution for us. From what my knowledge and my understanding, that it would need to be on display for 7 days. And then after that, we can have a special board meeting where we're actually approving that resolution. And then from there, we will submit that information over to the township treasurer's office, and then they will finalize that move on our district's behalf.
Got it.
Mhm.
Do you intend to have an information item for the next board meeting?
Yes, we would need to have an informational item for the board meeting pertaining to the movement. My goal tomorrow is to reach out to the attorney so that he can begin drawing up that paperwork, and then we can approve within 7 days. By the first meeting in October, we should be okay. And if not, once we post it for 7 days, we can come back and have a special board meeting, and it could possibly happen way before the first meeting in October.
Oh, okay.
Because we're in September the 18th now, so we
Yeah.
still have time.
Yeah.
So if we meet with the attorney, discuss, say, hey, this is where we're at. We had the finance committee meeting. We're moving forward with this transfer. Can you draw up the resolution? He would give us the next steps on what we should do, how many days it need to be posted, bring it back, and then we can take it from there.
Okay. Now, given the current situation and what you've encountered where, I mean, let's just say you've encountered unpaid invoices that have gone far too long. Has Gilbane had an issue with us paying him? Like, has he been asking for quite some, not he, have they been asking for quite some time for payment, or is this the first time that they've asked for the
Well,
21?
I wouldn't be in a position to ask. I wouldn't know.
Okay.
I wouldn't know about the past history in reference to payments. But what I do know is that I do have several invoices that we do owe them now.
Okay.
And that would be the reason for us to, in a sense, expedite. The invoices were from July up until current date. So that's where we're at.
We're fairly reasonable if you think about it, given our history now. But, okay, good. Anything else about Gilbane? Let me see if are there any comments online? No, let me check. Usually people ping me
Okay.
to see if they, no? All right. So we talked about amending the budget in January with the anticipation or expectation of publishing in November.
That's correct.
Um,
It will actually start, the process will begin in January.
okay,
So
process.
it will begin in January. We want to just focus on the tax levy first, get that process out of the way, and then at the top of the year, start with amending the budget.
Yeah, okay. And then, which brings us to the ISB audit, which I brought up, I don't know, was it July?
Mhm.
Where, yes, I believe it was either
Around July, yes.
Um,
August, yep, July, August.
And based on, let me see, I'm going to share the audit, because I don't think it was made publicly available. Is that correct? Dr. Carvalho, do you know if we've shared this out with the public, the ISB audit as it relates to grant money, Title I, Title II, et cetera?
No, this is a preliminary document, so this is not the final document.
Not the final, okay. So,
But it was
subject
not
to change?
shared. No, it's pretty much the same.
Okay. I believe you're quite familiar with it, Dr. Hill.
Yes, and I do have notes and I can speak to,
Okay.
yes.
Would you like to navigate, well, let's see, how do we do this? Do you share, or do you want to narrate as I'm navigating? Like, what are the key points in this document? Because,
Right, so it's a lengthy document, so I do have some notes
sure,
that I can share. And so basically, let's say if we start with ESER 2, we didn't submit our expenditure reports in on time. And so an action step for that now will ensure that the business office will submit the expenditure reports in a timely manner. Okay, that's key. So right now we do have grants that just expired August 30th. And so the due date for those expenditure reports to be at the state is September 20th. Some of those grants will have outstanding obligations because we're still waiting on orders. Other grants we will be able to finalize, but for the purpose of this grant, I made that statement to say we have to submit them on time.
Yes.
So whatever the date is, it's quarterly. We know that date. Just work together to make sure that happens. The other piece that was of concern was from 07-21 through 8-21-21. It depends on our grants. We had 2 business managers, 1 business manager, and then we had another one. So if you don't know basically where the last person left off at, you will come into the beginning of the school year thinking that, hey, let me start the expenditure report from 07-01. But what's unique about our grants here is that even though typically it would be a 07 July 1 to June 30th, we have an extended grant period. So extended grant project starts, our grants will end, it wouldn't end June 30th, our grants will end 08/31. So when an outgoing business manager is not in that position, they're thinking, okay, we're done. The new person is coming in. They're not knowing that, hey, we need to start 0901 as opposed to 0701. And the reason why we're starting 0901 because the grants expires 8/31. So if you don't know that coming in or have that information, you would double claim. So you will claim from the previous year and the current year. So that's what they mean when they say duplication of expenditures. And so, of course, that was a finding. The transactions were duplicated twice. The transactions were included in fiscal year 21 as well as fiscal year 22.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what we see with like Title I. And
Exactly.
Title
Exactly. And Title II. So you would see that throughout this document, that there were duplication of charges. And that's it. Many people, and when you're coming in, most districts it is 0701 through 6/30. Okay, so when you're coming in, if I know that there are expenditure reports due, I will start July 1. So it was a mistake, whoever completed because they didn't know and they were just coming in. But now knowing, everyone just needs to be familiar that the grants here for Proviso District 209, we start, because we have an extended project year, we start 0901, and then we get to claim those all the way to the end, the 08. And I, connected with Tina Schwartz. She's on my speed dial. And so I just wanted to, review to say, hey, is this the direction to go? Since these are duplication, of reimbursement. She said, absolutely. She said, if the grant ends 08/31, it's best to start 0901. Because if you start September 1st, you don't have to worry about a duplicate of expenditures or transactions being duplicated twice.
Now, what is the impact of a duplicate transaction, right? So if I have a grant, let's say, to keep it simple, $100 per grant, and I expense $50, but then, from what I read here, I didn't have that money yet. It was in a incorrect year.
Right.
And so I expensed it against, let's say, FY21, well, FY22, but I didn't have FY22 money. So what happens there with that 50?
So what happens, they will, when you claim your new expenditure report, they will hold that.
Oh, okay.
So let's say you submitted your expenditure report and you have $500 that you expected to get reimbursed for. You now will only receive $450.
Okay.
So it's not like the district will have to send a check to Illinois State Board of Education. It's like you complete your action plan, you share with them what you plan on doing, but just know that in many instances, when you complete your first expenditure report, those amounts will already come off the top, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
So I've had a lot of staff members, complain saying that invoices were paid late with, they were supposed to use grant money for an invoice. But now we're paying it current year, so technically you cannot use.
We cannot. So I can speak to that, and I'm glad you brought that up. When 8/31 ends, it's in. Like even if you submit, a PO was created on 08/29, enter a requisition, and then you have, it becomes a PO on 08/30, you made it because it's obligated by the end of that grant year. But once 08/31 hits, once September hits and you did not spend that money, now we can no longer use the current grant funds to pay for those expenses. We have to now use general funds. So the goal moving forward is to meet with anyone, that have invoices, meet with different division heads, just to know that if it's coming from a grant, and we did our best this year with that. If it's coming from a grant, we have to get some of these invoices in by said date. If not, it will come from general funds. However, there were some hiccups with staple orders this year. And with the staples orders, some of those will have to come from general funds because the grant expended, because bills were not paid on time for staples, if that makes sense. But again, When we have those invoices, we can't hold on to them. We have to submit them to the business office because the individual that's entering the requisition, they may not know it's related to a grant. They may think it's a district account. They wouldn't know. That's why it's important that when they come in, submit them to the business office. Make sure you send it to accounts payable at pths209.org. We will acknowledge receipt of that, and then we will proceed to pay.
Is there a way for them to differentiate, like this is to be paid with grant money? No?
Well, if it's to be paid with a grant, I would know, because those invoices come to me.
Oh, okay.
So if it's grant, whether it's timesheets, even if it's a teacher that's participating in extracurricular activity, if they participated, worked summer school, and they held on to timesheets, I'm just giving a scenario here, and we get them on September 1, now it will have to come out of general funds because that grant date closed. So if it's grants, I would know where those invoices are, as long as I'm in receipt of them, and then we can proceed to pay them.
Okay.
But all grants, anything that's filtered through grants, it comes through me. Now, if it's any invoices that's going to the buildings and they're coming out of other district accounts, then of course those will come over to the business office. But reference to grants, we have an administrative assistant now who would keep her eyes on any grant related purchases so that situations like this won't occur.
Got it. Okay. Excellent. So is she monitoring the mailbox, so to speak, or?
So typically what should happen is that if you have a grant account, let's say it's $4,300 is Title I. That means every month we need to pull an open PO report for Title I. And then you will see what is encumbered, right? And what was actually paid. Any item that's encumbered saying, hey, funds were set aside because we know there's a pending purchase, we're just waiting on an invoice, we're able to contact that vendor so that vendor can send us over that invoice. So in reference to grants, it's easier to track because of that open PO. Because I can go there and say, these were all the expenses that were paid or charged to the grant. Now I see we don't have invoices and we have not paid them. Now this is what we need to do. Reach out to them, have them to send over their invoice so that we can close that out in the system. And it will move from an encumbered status to now a transaction detail paid status.
Got it. So then, going back to this document, the common theme here is that due to some confusion, we didn't know when to claim them. Okay.
And that's just a simple, explanation. And when Miss Tina was here, we had many conversations. She's like a new buddy now. But if you don't know going in, coming out, it's a common mistake. That's why it's, real good to have exit interviews, communication, just to see where the last person left off at. So if a new person is coming in, they'll know how to pick up on that.
Well, what is the impact, would you say, to the budget? Because knowing that we had outstanding invoices to be used with grant money, but we didn't use that grant money, did we take overall $100,000 hit to the budget? Do you know just an estimate of how much we had to use, how much of the ed fund we had to use to cover those invoices?
Are we referring to grants or are we referring to district as a whole?
District as a whole.
Okay. District as a whole, right now we do have a running list of past due invoices. By the next board meeting, I will have the dollar amount for you.
Okay.
But what I can say that it is a pretty substantial amount that, vendors want their money.
Oh, yeah.
But what we're doing is moving forward in reference to, met with the business office today. We have a weekly meeting. And in that weekly meeting, we know that there are some vendors who we need to pay monthly. So I said, just think about your monthly obligations in your home.
Mhm.
That's how we would start operating in the business office. So in the business office, we know some of those monthly obligations include transportation. We know those monthly obligations include all of our utility bills, gas, light, water, phone. So as we're preparing this bill list, we need to ensure that those monthly obligations are on that bill list.
Got it.
If that is done, then that will at least get us steady to pay off, some of those past due balances and perhaps eventually, get us up to current. And then connecting with each department. So educational services, are there any invoices that need to be on the bill list for this month? We decided to close accounts payable earlier during the month. Let's say it's usually the 28th. We're saying the 23rd now. The 23rd of the month. And the reason why we're using the 23rd, because the 23rd will allow us an opportunity to speak to the education division, speak to any administrative assistants in the buildings, speak to the athletic director, speak to the SPED director, speak to all these individuals to say, hey, accounts payable is closing soon. Do you have any invoices? And if you have any invoices, please submit them so that we can include them on the bill list.
Mhm.
That will assist us moving forward. But now we do have a substantial list. It is growing, by the day. But we're doing our best to get through it. But I can probably anticipate it may be a list at least for like the next months. I can't say how many, because you can't pay them all
Mhm.
in one bill list because it's growing. So the main concern is to really take a look at those heavy hitters. For me, it would be our utility bills. It would be, transportation, our out-of-district placement. In fact, I'm meeting with First Student tomorrow. And within that meeting, we're establishing the date that they need to have their invoices over to district office, with the understanding that if the invoices are not in by the 23rd, they will have to wait until that next period
Mhm.
in order for them to get paid.
Got it.
Okay?
At the last board meeting, you said there was a $1.3 million outstanding order, I think,
1.8
1.8?
for first student.
for first
yes.
student, yes. And you said that you wanted to reconcile, right?
Mhm.
Reconcile with what you have, just to make sure that we're not overpaying them.
That's
Nobody-
correct. That's correct. That's correct.
Has there been a resolution on that?
Right now, we're still working through it. The conversation I did have with first student is that we will work together, because it's just not us, it's them.
Mhm.
We're in this together. They have to do their part, we have to do our part. With that being said, they submit their invoices in a timely manner, current. We will make sure, try our best to stay current now moving forward.
Okay.
Now, in reference to reconciling and going back, because there's just so much activity that has occurred over the years with First Student and Proviso, that would take a while to reconcile. But the representative that I did speak with, she said, going current and moving forward is good, but we would still need to address the back. But if we can at least ensure that they're getting paid monthly, that would be a start
Okay.
while we're working through the 1.8. Because the last thing we want to do right now with the budget is pull down 1.8. I'm sorry. I don't feel good about that one. Not 1.8. I would rather make sure we take care of everyone else,
Yes.
because they did receive, and I have a picture. Mr. Gary sent me a picture with the representative for First Student receiving that check. So they were quite happy. So I do believe with that 1.3 million they have, it will be enough to sustain right now.
Yes.
While we work on reconciling, but at least for now, send in for current,
Yeah.
and we'll make sure we're good to go.
Good. Excellent. So I know we've moved on to the open purchase order report. Is that going to be available then regularly for future board meetings, like?
Well, so the open PO report, I wouldn't recommend an open PO report for board meetings, and the reason why I say that is because we have a lot of blanket POs. So a blanket PO is a vendor who we know we have, let's say like an account set up, we know we have monthly obligations to them.
Mhm.
And so what we do, we estimate what that bill with that particular vendor would be for the year.
Oh, I see.
So let's say if it's, I'm just throwing a number out, let's say if it's first student, we have a transportation blanket PO for $2 million sitting out there. So if you look at the open PO, it appears that we owe that $2 million, but we don't. So for me personally, I wouldn't recommend having the open PO on display because we have a lot of blanket POs that are out there for vendors who we know we have monthly obligations to, and it's out. So let's say we have an out-of-district placement, $600,000 for the whole year. If you look at that open PO, you would think, oh, we owe them $600,000, but that's not the case. That is what it would be for a duration of a whole year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think we do that for the special ed out of place.
Yes, we do that for out-of-district placement. Yes, we do out-of-district placement.
That's millions of dollars.
Exactly. We have transportation.
Correct.
We have GFS and Bob
Yes.
Dairy. There are several
St.
provide.
Mary's, I can't remember all the schools.
Joseph,
Yeah.
Joseph Academy.
Yes, Joseph. So all of those
POs
schools.
for those schools.
Exactly. And that's just to make us, so when out of district placement, when we do receive an invoice from them, they don't need to enter any requisitions now. All they need to do is just submit the business office that invoice with an okay to pay, and we will process.
Correct.
So it makes life easier.
Yes.
You know what I mean? As opposed to interest.
That's what we used to do.
Oh,
I don't know what
interesting.
happened last year.
Interesting, because I was going to ask that last year's
Last year was
stat.
an epic mod that I don't understand.
Yeah,
Just did things very differently.
well, yeah, it's quite evident in I did an analysis on how the length it took from getting the invoice to paying, it was like 200 days.
Very, very different. Everything was, just had a different process.
Yes, so it sounds like SPED has been.
Yes, it's SPED. Yes, SPED is, and this is a process that happened prior to my tenure. Everyone recognized that the out-of-district placements, they were not getting paid in a timely manner for whatever reason, okay? But now invoices were submitted, it wasn't getting paid. We don't have to worry about that. There was a contract, they met with those out-of-district placement. They have an estimate on what the dollar amount would be for that given year. And then with that being said, they submit the invoice, okay to pay, then we proceed to process,
Excellent.
okay?
So we expect to see the average days to pay an invoice.
I would
dramatically.
say on average, 30 to 60,
Wow, okay.
30 to 60. And the reason why I'm saying 60, just in case that vendor sends it after the closing date, after the accounts payable closing date. But if you submit it by that date, as long as hands are all on deck in the business office, we can possibly ensure processing, but I would never ever want to say 30 days because most billing terms in many school districts is a 60-day turnaround period. But it will be our goal that if you submit your invoice by a certain date, then we will ensure that they will be included on the bill list. For example, Pace just reached out. Pace said, Dr. Hill, did you receive our invoice? And I said, yes, we did. They said, were we on the bill list for September? And I stated, we received the invoice the day after accounts payable closed.
No.
But I will ensure that we will have it for the next month, and they were fine.
Okay.
So even if we're unable, so the goal is if we can't pay them within 30 days, it's a phone call, it's a conversation. Just pick up the phone and call the vendor and say, hey, we received your invoice on said date. Please don't worry. You are on the bill list for the upcoming month. Conversations that I've been having with vendors for our past due bills, many have been accepting, okay, I know transition happens, you're working through it, as long as I have it by this date, we're good. Some vendors, I would say, hey, I don't want to trust the mail right now. I know you in need of payment. So one person came here from downtown Chicago today, which is one of our post-secondary partners, One Goal, and they picked the check up in their hand. Hallelujah. I said, I don't want to put it in the mail. I know that the grant expires 9/30. I know it needs to be dispersed and in your hand by a certain date. Can you come pick it up, or do you want us to mail? They said, Dr. Hill, we will come up there and pick it up, and we'll be there by 3. So they came today. So even if we can't meet the 30-day, or we have to stretch it to 60, just call them. People have been more than patient and willing to work with us.
Excellent, excellent. So we got paint here. Nope. But there is a comment I saw that came through. Let's see here.
Whatever students do now.
A decrease of 140 days. Excellent. Yes. All right. So with the last item that I'd like to talk about is the updated credit card policy, which I understand that you've, Dr. Hill, you've changed the way we manage the credit card.
Right.
drastically.
So speaking in reference to the credit card, I did send notices, email exchange out. We did visit each building principal on Friday. And the bottom line is, before a credit card could be utilized, which is important, they need to complete why we're using the credit card.
Oh, okay.
So before you use the credit card, we're asking, what is the purpose? You know, many times when you say, what is the purpose, we're more than, then it has to get approved.
Yeah.
Okay? You're more cautious or on what you're spending on when you have to get it approved. And so basically they would send it to myself and Miss Carla, who handles our credit card transactions within the district. Of course, they will identify who's using the card, the last 4 digits of the card, the vendor name, the dollar amount, and just basically, what is the expense purpose? Once we read the expense purpose, we see it's all geared towards students, student learning, student activity, then of course that will be a go. Even if it's an activity that takes place on a weekend, we're still asking, this still need to be completed, you know, before you go. Just to make sure that we're using this accordingly.
Good.
You know, and let me say responsibly.
Responsible, yes. Are the credit cards associated with a person, or does it say Proviso Township High School? Or?
So we have the credit cards, let's say for district office administrators have a card with their name on it. Okay. Building principals have 2 cards. They have one with the building principal's name on it, and then one is a student activity credit card with that name on it as well. So so basically, it's just not Proviso District 209. The cards they do have names on them.
Okay.
But we did go around, we had everyone to re-sign for this year, reviewing the policy with them, the credit card policy, going over this new document that must be completed, going over the reconciliation form that must be completed, and something that they taught me in the business office, which is really cool, that if they don't submit the reconciliation card on time, the form on time, we do cut the card off.
Oh.
So you need to make sure that you submit it. So we also have a credit card reporting document as well, a calendar that we did create, which is pretty much aligned to accounts payable deadline to ensure that we're paying the credit card bill on time as well.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, so let's say, for example, the invoice date is July the 5th. You know, you need to make sure you submit your receipts by July 31st. Board meeting date is August 8th, and then we'll cut the check on August the 9th. So they will have this as well. And then that will expedite, just to ensure that we're not incurring, you know, any late charges and things of that nature.
Excellent, excellent. I'll bring it up because last year, there was a one card that was floating around. I'll call it a floater because it was used by everyone. Yes, Dr. Cabales knows what I'm referring to. Dr. Brass's card was apparently used by everyone, and Dr. Brass was not the building principal. And so it was very difficult to see, well, in the analysis, you could see his charges were all over the place, but he wasn't charging them. So it was very difficult for an accountability perspective that, if you were to ask him, why did you go to, I don't know, Melrose Park one day and then at the same day you're in Lockport? How's that, well, I guess it's possible, but what's going on? Well, it turns out that that card was used by multiple people. And so how do we prevent that from happening again?
Well, I know, let's say I was board approved August 23rd at 12:21 a.m. in the morning. I pulled the card the next day.
Excellent, thank you.
So we have that card. We just have to, the building principal is responsible for that card. So if we know that that building principal is no longer serving that capacity, we have to pull it.
Okay.
That's
Close
what,
it
immediately, pull it,
immediately.
actually close the card out,
Yes.
So that's how, you just have to be mindful on who has the card, who's no longer serving that capacity. If they're no longer serving that capacity as the building principal, the card made its way back over to district office last year, because technically speaking, if somebody's name is on it and they're not using it, that's a no-no to begin with.
Yes.
So, but yes, that's the practice. All building principals, are familiar
Business
that no one can
department
share.
that
Mhm.
immediately.
Mm-hmm.
No one can share the cards. It's the building principal.
Excellent.
Their name is on it. That's just like I'm using your card. Mr. O'Kep, I'm using your card. I'm going out having a good time. I'm at the Gucci shop, or I'm just saying whatever.
No sense.
No, you can come knocking on my door, Dr. Hill. You can't do that.
I believe he was gone.
There's a period, there was 2 charges in June when he was transitioning, and that's what caught my attention. Like, how is this possible? Well, it turned out they were legitimate charges, but they were being used by someone else.
Yes, someone adds to the student activity card be authorized for student activities. Absolutely, yes. However, make sure that you submit your receipts and you were able to reconcile. So yes, there are 2 cards for each building. One is a student activity because they do engage in many, okay? And so there are times where they need a credit card purchase. Now, I will say this, that I did share with building administrators this year. If that vendor, the goal is to have an established approved vendor. If we have an established approved vendor, if we can go by way of a purchase order before we use the credit card, to me, that would be the easiest way to go. That would limit a lot of the credit card activity. But we do know on occasions that they may need the credit card, but we want the credit card to be a last resort situation. If we receive the authorizations, the approval forms, all that in time, we could go in, someone could go in and enter a requisition if that vendor accepts purchase orders. The goal is to use purchase orders. Purchase orders for me and across are cleaner than a credit card purchase. So we had several conversations with some staff members already. See if this vendor accepts a purchase order. If they accept a purchase order, we will ask, as long as you give us advance notice, enter the requisition, we would turn it over into a PO, we would send the purchase order over to them. What we don't want is to have it to say, okay, let's just use the credit card. We want to move away from that.
Okay.
We want to use the credit card if we have to, not just because it's there.
Yeah, I understand that happened often, not to name names, but with the athletics, right? I understand that because of because of the situation with the business office where invoices weren't being paid, I understand that the athletics department may have used a credit card to, for related expenses, and that's why now I'm starting to understand why we saw the credit card usage just skyrocket. But my hope is that we
want to streamline it. We will review it. Someone sent a request over today, and then my first question, okay, before we use the credit card, let's reach out to that vendor. That will be the first order of business for someone in the business office to see, do we have time for you to receive a purchase order? If they say no, we need it like by tomorrow, then of course we would go to the credit card. But the goal is for most transactions, if we can move to the purchase order system, that will speak volumes and that would make life easier for everyone.
Yes,
Mhm.
agreed, agreed. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the meeting. I don't have anything else to add. Does anyone in the audience have anything to add?
Mr. Bennett, you have something to add? Dr. Cavalli spoke already. You have something to add, Mr.
No,
Bennett?
other than we're gonna continue doing, what we have been doing with our past bills, and that we're gonna continue until our past bills are completed, and that is, bringing as, not an information, but as, what did we say, Dr. Hill?
Action item?
An action item,
Mhm.
Yes,
and list them all, so that it's complete transparency.
yes, agreed,
I think
agreed.
it's best.
Yes, and it sounds like we'll have several months worth of
Yes.
catch-up,
Yes.
which is fine. I think, and as you mentioned, we want to work with our vendors, right? They provide a service, we should pay them, and we should pay them in a timely manner.
And like I said before, if we can't pay them within 30 days is, you're blessed to receive it
Yeah.
within 30 days, okay? But if for some reason it moves past 30 days, a phone call speaks volumes. And they're okay. Many vendors are okay. As long as they know it's coming, it's the unknown that's puzzling to vendors. Like, I don't know when I'm receiving it. But if you tell a vendor, hey, you may not be on a September bill list, you're on an October bill list, as long as they know that payment is coming to them, they're okay.
Mhm.
We're not getting the phone calls, we're not getting the constant emails. Especially if you say, hey, on Wednesday morning, you can come by here and pick it up, we will have it on hand. There we
And
go.
what happened oftentimes is they contacted board members.
Okay.
And so that's what happened with a lot of the spread vendors and providers. They reach out to board members and we're like, what's going on? You scratch the surface and then you unveil that there's something deeper. So, yeah, I don't mind getting emails, but you know, if I get an email about a missed payment, then I start wondering, right?
It's embarrassing for the district.
It truly is, truly.
And then, of course, some may slip through the cracks,
Oh, yeah.
because there is
It
no
happens.
system that's perfect, you know, but the goal would be at least to just minimize,
Oh, yeah.
you know, what we've seen.
Yeah, what you don't want is a common theme here, right? What I was seeing was a common theme of missed payments just across the board. And, yeah, I'm glad that we're addressing it and we're moving forward.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I guess that concludes our meeting. So,
Okay.
short and sweet, right?
Sure.
I appreciate Dr. Hill for speaking like 95% of the time.
Oh, no.
I was wondering at what point would you need a water?
And I had it in my bag, I didn't. It's okay.
All
Have
right,
a good
well,
evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for your participation and attendance. Have a good night.